You're sitting by a fire. Your back aches from a long walk. Smoke stings your eyes. In your hands, a handful of soaked acorns, 6 fat beetle larvae, and a fern root you'll need to chew for half an hour before it softens enough to swallow. That was your ordinary Tuesday, 20,000 years ago. Forget the feasts, forget the lucky hunts. We're looking at what humans ate every day, without exception, for hundreds of thousands of years, across 4 completely different points in history. The answer sits further from roasted mammoth than you'd expect, and it explains why you can't say no to French fries. The core rule of the Stone Age: never spend more energy chasing food than you get back from eating it. A deer chase often ends with nothing. A raspberry bush or a beehive isn't going anywhere. In 1964, anthropologist Richard Lee spent a month tracking the Kung San in the Kalahari Desert. He weighed every piece of meat carried into camp. He weighed every sack of gathered plants. The group spent about 15 hours a week gathering food, less than a standard office week. Most of their calories came from a single food source, the mongongo nut. 100 grams of mongongo delivers around 650 calories, the same as a cheeseburger, minus the drive-through line and minus hunting down a cow. Wild tubers and roots stood in for bread, but you couldn't eat most of them raw, too fibrous. Cattail root and wild potato went into the ash of the fire first. Wild almonds were often toxic, and acorns needed hours of soaking in running water to leach out the tannins before anyone ground them into flour. Insects supplied clean protein and fat without any hunting at all. A 2013 report from the UN Food and Agriculture Organization documented over 1,900 edible insect species eaten across traditional diets worldwide. Each summer in the Australian Alps, Aboriginal groups gathered at the same rock crevices where bogong moths swarm by the millions, roasting them in ash pits and eating them by the handful. A harvest so reliable it drew clans together for weeks at a time. A child could gather termites and beetle larvae just as easily. Locust swarms, when they struck, delivered close to a year's worth of protein in a single afternoon. Groups across North Africa and the Middle East gathered them by the sackful, dried them in the sun, and ground them into a coarse meal that kept for months. A handful of insects did for your ancestor roughly what a protein bar does for you. For 1.5 million years, our species lived on this diet: roots, nuts, insects, and the occasional bite of small game. Around 1.8 million years ago, humans started cooking over fire. Archaeologists working at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa found ash and burned bone dated to roughly 1 million years ago, among the oldest solid evidence of controlled fire anywhere on Earth. Fire breaks down tough plant fibers and neutralizes some toxins before food ever reaches your mouth. Researchers call this external digestion. Heat does part of the work your gut used to handle alone. The body started pulling roughly 3 times more energy out of the same food, and over generations, the human gut shrank while the jaw grew smaller too. Chewing simply stopped being a full-time job. The brain claims 20% of the body's total energy output. Without a hot meal, an organ that expensive to run simply couldn't be fed. So what actually went on the fire every night? Forget the mammoths. 9 times out of 10, it was ground squirrels, tortoises, and lizards. Anything you could catch with your hands or a stick. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, cut marks on small animal bones nearly 2 million years old show hominins were already butchering rodents, birds, and tortoises long before anyone learned to control flame. Meat stayed a garnish to plant food for nearly the entire history of our species. 10,000 years ago, humans struck a deal with a plant. What did they get in return? Farming gets called progress. For an individual's daily plate, it was a collapse in variety. A hunter-gatherer ate hundreds of species of plants and animals over the course of a year. Wheat domestication began in the Fertile Crescent around 10,000 BC, and within a few thousand years, settlements like Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey held thousands of people whose entire yearly food supply rode on a single harvest. An early farmer depended on 2 or 3 crops: wheat, barley, rice. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner all turned into the same thick gray mush, crushed grain boiled in water, often with no salt. Grain got milled between stone querns, and grit from the stone ended up in the flour. At Abu Huraira in Syria, one of the earliest farming settlements on record, archaeologists found grooves worn straight into people's teeth from years of gripping and processing grain by hand. Farmers' teeth wore down for years, long before old age set in. Early beer wasn't a party drink. It was liquid bread, thick, low in alcohol, rich in B vitamins that boiled grain mush couldn't supply. A clay tablet from the city of Uruk, dated to around 3000 BC, records beer rations paid out to workers, among the oldest written accounting documents ever found. Fermentation killed off bacteria in dirty water, so adults and children both drank it. A 2022 study in the journal PNAS analyzed 167 skeletons spanning 38,000 to 2,400 years old. The earliest European farmers stood nearly 4 centimeters shorter on average than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. Humanity hadn't regained that height even 2,000 years later. A stable calorie count came at the price of height and teeth. The first great civilizations grew up on this same grain. What actually changed? An ordinary Egyptian ate bread, onions, and lentils every day. Beef went to priests and pharaohs. Workers building the Great Pyramid at Giza got paid in food. Egyptologist Barry Kemp calculated a standard ration of 10 loaves of bread and roughly a gallon of beer per person per day. In crowded cities, onions and garlic doubled as a natural antibiotic. Fresh Nile fish spoiled within a day in the heat, so it got salted or dried in the sun instead. Sweetness came only from dates and the occasional risky raid on a wild beehive. Sugar, as most of the world would come to know it, didn't exist yet. Greeks and Romans called heavy meat eaters barbarians. A civilized person ate the Mediterranean triad: grain, olives, watered-down wine. Roman soldiers and the urban poor lived on pulse, a porridge of boiled emmer wheat, eaten from cant pots twice a day for centuries. A legionary's daily grain ration weighed close to a kilogram, ground and cooked into porridge or baked flat depending on what the camp had on hand. Olive oil seasoned the food and got rubbed onto skin in place of soap. In Rome, how white your bread was announced your social class. The paler the flour, the richer the household. Roman garum, a sauce made from fermented fish, went into almost every dish instead of salt. It smelled exactly like it sounds: fish rotting in the sun, left to ferment in open vats for weeks. Garum production got pushed outside city limits because of the stench. Something that would shut down a restaurant today, a Roman poured over dinner. A legionary on campaign drank pasca, water cut with sour wine vinegar, sometimes with a raw egg stirred in. It tasted rough, but the vinegar disinfected the stomach on marches where clean drinking. Water often wasn't an option at all. Officers drank real wine, the rank and file drank vinegar-water, and marched 20 miles a day on it. A forager, a farmer, a soldier. What connects their diets across 200,000 years? Each of them ate at the edge of what they could find, grind, or ferment. Sugar, salt, and fat were scarce, not a supermarket aisle. Meat came rarely, sweetness came seasonally, and most calories in every era on this list arrived ground, boiled, or fermented from a single dominant grain or nut. The brain that formed under that scarcity still runs the same program. Spot something fatty or sweet, eat it while you can, tomorrow it might be gone. 20,000 years sit between you and that fire. In front of you is a bowl of oatmeal that needs no soaking to leach out poison and no half hour of chewing to soften. Your ancestor would have given up everything for that bowl and asked for seconds.